Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. And I recently read a short story by Langston Hughes called Cora Unashamed, and I really think it could have also been titled Cora Unleashed. So I wanted to talk about this story by Langston Hughes called Cora Unashamed. It's a fairly well-known story, I believe, by Langston Hughes. I mean, it was turned into a movie in 2000. And that's pretty impressive that they managed to make a whole movie out of this very short story. I believe it's only 7 pages. Langston Hughes is very talented in being able to share a very condensed story, but with a lot of emotion. Cora Unashamed is such a good example of this. The summary I wrote down for this video: Cora is sick of everyone's shit. And I'm just going to get into the story in and of itself. I'll link down below the story if I can find it online. I actually read it in the Langston Hughes reader from my library, but I'm pretty sure a lot of Langston Hughes' stuff is up online. What I want to talk about with this story is the rise in tension up until that climax piece in this. So I'm going to go through how pretty much the full story through the end, because it's a very good example of how you can write concisely and to the point, but bring a lot of emotion in that conciseness. And that's not to say that purple prose writing is bad or it should never be written. By all means, that's not what I'm saying at all. But this is just a way of writing that I think is very impactful, especially with the story that he's telling. So the story starts out with one of the best sentences I've read in a while as far as really getting to know setting. Melton was one of those miserable in-between little places, not large enough to be a town, nor small enough to be a village. That is, a village in the rural, charming sense of the word. In that full sentence, we get that Melton is not a great place to live. In fact, the next few sentences really clench that in with saying that Melton has no charm at all. And so this is one of those dreary little town places that's not even really a town, that are just miserable. Nobody's really happy there, and everyone knows each other, and maybe because everyone knows each other, people aren't happy. So it's just a great way to set up the spot where we already know the main character of this story is not going to be in a happy place, because already the town is miserable, right? So when we meet Cora in the next paragraph, we get Cora Jenkins was one of the least of the citizens of Melton. And there's a sentence, I'm not going to read the full thing because it has a word in it that I'm sure you can think of when it comes to the time period this was written in the 30s, and mindsets about people who are black. So, but she was what people refer to when they want to be polite, and I'm going to let you fill in the rest or read that sentence. But when you even just see that is the what people refer to when they wanted to be polite. So when they wanted to be, right? We have this image of maybe people don't want to be polite most of the time, maybe especially to Cora. So this really sets up that Cora is different from a lot of people in her town. And we already know Melton is miserable. So we already have that first bit of tension within the first 2 paragraphs. You want to get into really good writing, that's phenomenal. Being able to have that hook and line is essential. So putting in that place, what's the story about? It's about Cora, and what else is this horrible shit show of a town. And we now have the premise of that story is how Cora is living in this town. So further on, we learn that she is the maid of this family called the Studevants. It's getting into the next point of tension, and that is this sentence. The Studevants thought they owned her, and they were perfectly right, they did. This is going into, she works for them, but she knows that going somewhere else isn't really an option for her. So imagine her family is the only black family in this town. I don't know about you guys, but when you are physically different from everyone else around you, if you've ever been in that situation, it's a very awkward situation, and almost especially so if those people look at you in suspect are not greatly. If they want to be polite, then they call you this word that's not very polite. Already imagine that, and then realizing that because you are this person who looks so other to those around you, that your prospects aren't vast. It's not very good. So she only has so many places she could work, so she works for the students. And the students pay decently for the area that they're in. Like Cora even expouses upon how she could go to a poorer family, but the problem is they treat her worse than the Studevants. So this really gives you a place and time of where Cora is at with her surroundings and the people around her. So Langston Hughes goes into a little bit of a few paragraphs into how she gets into what he calls the teeth in the trap of economic circumstance, which is such a great line, by the way. But how she gets into this trap is the fact that she's the oldest of 8 children, and she helped raise all of her siblings. So in order to do that, she had to work, and also she didn't really have a childhood. Like since her siblings kept coming, she had to help them out, and her parents could only do so much as well. And in fact, it even talks a little bit about how her dad drinks a lot, as someone would if they had 8 kids. And I think even to top it on that, just that he has 8 kids, it's not having the money to afford 8 kids. And that's the reason why you have this mindset of, I have 8 kids, this is horrible, I'm going to drink, right? Whereas if you had the money to take care of those 8 kids, then maybe you wouldn't drink as much in those kind of circumstances. I don't know, I'm just guessing at this point. But they're in this kind of position because of them being in this small kind of cruddy little town, and not really having the opportunity to do more than what they're doing, probably. So then it also gets into how Cora's siblings all leave. The boys leave, I guess, to find work, and the girls are leaving and the girls leave too, but it says here, one by one, the girls left too, mostly in disgrace. And there's another line here that I'm going to leave you to guess why they're flying in disgrace is, there was something about the cream and tan Jenkins girls that attracted the white farm hands. So, it's this time where these girls are a different color than the rest of the people around them, and these boys are kind of taking advantage of that a little bit, as far as like not wanting to marry them because of their skin tone. So just sleeping around with these girls are maybe, and I hate that my mind went to this, is maybe forcing them. So that's a horrible mindset to get into, but this kind of, once again, makes that rise in tension, is that it's really hard to make connections with someone if they're prejudiced against you. So we're getting that example after example of how Melton is just this terrible place. So after that, it talks about how even Cora, though she was a humble person and kind of kept to herself, she had a lover, and it was this guy who comes into town, and his name is Joe, and he sleeps with her, and then she becomes pregnant, and then he leaves. She's stuck in this town, pregnant by this guy who didn't stay with her, and yeah, so now we have our next point of tension, that she now has this child. And this paragraph goes in is, Cora couldn't go anywhere to have her child, nor tried to hide it. When the baby grew big within her, she didn't feel that it was a disgrace. The Studevants told her to go home and stay there. Joe left town. Pa cussed, Ma cried. One April morning, the kid was born. She had gray eyes, and Cora called her Josephine after Joe. What's interesting, when I was looking up where I could find the story of Cora Unashamed, is this poem comes up. And It's called the Cora. It's a poem called Cora by Langston Hughes, and I think it probably is in reference to this short story. So I'm gonna read out the poem. I broke my heart this morning. Ain't got no heart no more. Next time a man comes near me, gonna shut and lock my door. 'Cause they treat me mean, the ones I love. They always treat me mean. So I think that might have to do with this particular situation, and what a great tie-in if that is what that is. But so that's a next point in tension is now she is with this child, and granted she does not see her child as a disgrace. She doesn't see her child as something to be ashamed of, which is, I'm guessing, what the Cora Unashamed is built upon as far as that title. But everyone else does. So her parents are devastated by this, and then her employers are judging her about this too, saying, as long as you appear pregnant, then you have to go. So there is a bit of thought that Cora has where she knows that Joe wasn't going to stay, and because she puts it in this terms of course she hadn't expected to marry Joe or keep him. He was of that other world too, and what she means is that he was white, so she knew he wasn't going to stay because of that. Then later on, at the end of the page, that all happens, like, so her child's only around for like 2 paragraphs, because then we get in, but in a little while they didn't need to tell Cora to leave her child at home, for Josephine died of whooping cough. I just imagine that you're in that situation where you have this child that you love so much, but the one you made that child with doesn't want to stay with you and left, and then your employers are telling you, oh, you can't bring your child to work with you, even though, she wants to be around her kid, but she knows she also needs to work in order to feed her child, and then her child dies. So now you have that next point of tension in the story. So up until her child dies, Cora doesn't, she cusses sometimes, but for the most part, she's this calm and humble person. And then we get into finally where we get this is she cussed out God for taking away the life that she herself had given. And there's a paragraph where Cora is doing just that, is she's cussing and saying, why did you do this to me? Why did you take my child? So we have this brief burst of Cora kind of losing it. Understandably, by the way. Like, that's so understandably to be upset and to be angry at that situation. But she allows herself a moment to do that, which she needs. But then she goes back into that quiet and withdrawn period. And this makes me think, like, that this whole scene up until then just makes me think about the stereotype of black women, that they're angry. And then we have Cora here who's going through all this stuff. She doesn't really have, like, explosive emotions up until then. So this poor lady is going through that. And But anyway, so it goes into years that passed, and the Studevants have a child around the same time as Cora had Josephine, and they had named their child Jessie. Cora feels a very maternal instinct. So it says here, Cora hated to think about her going away, and they're talking about Jessie going to college. In her heart, she had adopted Jessie. So there's quite a few points in here where Cora links Jessie back to her daughter of Josephine, like saying, oh, Jessie would have been the same age as Josephine is now. So that's a very big show in how Cora feels about this girl. Well, Jessie is not portrayed as the brightest of students, and in fact we don't really get to see too much of Jessie interacting. Like, we don't really get to see a lot of her dialogue or her actions. It's pointed out again and again that she's kind of dull, she's a little bit behind other students, she graduated high school late. And then we get this paragraph that happens, but something had happened to Jessie. Cora knew it before Mrs. Art did. Jessie was not too stupid to have a boyfriend. And what this gets into is that Jessie's pregnant. So she tells Cora about that, and Cora tells her, it's okay, you'll have this baby. Cora tells her, you know what, I'll tell your parents. So Cora tells Jesse's parents that she's pregnant, or that Jesse's pregnant. Cora doesn't think that Jesse should be ashamed of this, nor does she think it's bad that they can make it work with the baby's father, that Jesse can marry this boy and that they can have a life from here on out. But then they kind of freak out and say, you know, that's not good, and what have you. They start whispering behind closed doors, and trying to figure things out. The mother takes Jesse away for about 10 days, and then they come back. So it says, after 10 days, Mrs. Art and her daughter came back. Mrs. Art is Studevant? Yeah, Mrs. Art is Mrs. Studevant. I believe she remarried because her husband had died. Not important. They're kind of jerks. So, after 10 days, Mrs. Art and her daughter came back, but Jessie was thinner and paler than she'd ever been in her life. There was no light in her eyes at all. Mrs. Art looked a little scared as they got off the train. So this is going into, she had an abortion and her parents forced her to have one. So in the next couple paragraphs, it goes, a week passed. They tried to make Jessie eat then, but the food wouldn't stay on her stomach. Her eyes grew yellow, her tongue white. Her heart acted crazy. They called in old Dr. Brown, but within a month, as quick as that, Jessie died. So most likely she died of complications from the abortion that she had, and it was probably expounded by the fact that she was heavily depressed after that operation. So she probably had like an infection or something else that made her skin go yellow, or her eyes grow yellow, and her tongue white. So there's probably something along there. After that, they have a funeral for Jessie, and this is where we see Cora really, why I think this should also be called, like, another title can be Cora Unleashed, because she pretty much tells off everyone at the funeral. She goes over, you know, you guys killed this child, they killed you, they killed, you know, all this stuff. She's talking to Jessie, is, you know, they killed you, they killed your child, and she pretty much shames everyone there, saying, they preach a sermon, but then they don't say anything, and they don't do anything for you. You know, Cora builds up that emotion and just splatters it on everyone, which is this great moment, because other than when she was cursing out God, she didn't say anything. She didn't really do anything to these people who are treating her badly. And granted, it's understandable why she didn't, because when you're the one who is different from everyone else around you, it's really hard to speak up, because if no one else is going to speak up for you, the consequences could be dire, right? So then we get into this last few paragraphs, which is, now she and Ma live from the garden they raise and from the junk Pa collects, when they can take by force a part of his meager earnings before he buys his liquor. Cora leaves her job, or she's fired, or she leaves her job, and now she just lives with her parents, and they scrape by in this town that's kind of awful. It's just so full of emotion. Like, my heart goes out to Cora and that situation, and that rise in tension up until the funeral really stands out starkly of why that happened, why she felt the need to speak out then, is because this child who she kind of adopted in her own mind died because of this culture that was there in Melton. So yes, that's my tiny analysis on Cora Unashamed by Langston Hughes. It's a really good short story. I highly recommend Langston Hughes to everyone. And by all means, if you have any thoughts on this short story, or, you know, the points in tension that end up happening, comment down below. If you like this video, please give it that thumbs up button. If you like seeing this face talk about books, then click that subscribe button. And as always, may you get lost in the book.